Ukraine plans to forcibly resettle and re-educate residents of the Donbas because Kyiv has finally capitulated to Moscow after Russia returned Ukrainian ships the Russian Navy captured a year ago. But this is StopFake, the place where we break down Russian disinformation. So let's get to it. Russian media were busy this week disseminating fakes about what Ukraine was allegedly planning to do with the residents of the occupied Donbas after the territories are returned to Ukraine. Olga Skabeyeva, the anchor of the Russian state television Rossiya 1 60-minute program, announced the plan is all about linguistic and ethnic cleansing. Other publications called the alleged plan a land grab, inhuman and fascist, while a member of the separatist Donetsk legislature warned that Ukraine should remember how Hitler's career ended. The source of this latest Russian disinformation outpouring was a scanned document published on the Telegram messaging platform in an account called The Insider, sent by a user called Joker. The document states that a National Security Council working group prepared a draft strategy for the safe reintegration of the Donbas region currently occupied by Russia. But the published document is filled with inaccuracies. The stationery the document is written on has the wrong street name. The initials of one of the persons the document is addressed to are wrong. Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council Communications Office told us the document is a fake. Last month, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that a state strategy for reintegrating the Donbas and the Crimean Peninsula back into Ukraine was necessary. Such a strategy should be based on consensus, realism, and be transparent and include public discussion. According to National Security and Defense Council advisor for the integration and restoration of the Donbas, Serhiy Sovokho, the agency plans to create a national platform for reconciliation and unity. The group is looking at how other military conflicts, such as Northern Ireland and Bosnia, were resolved and hopes to apply the most appropriate and tested options to the situation in Ukraine. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Vadim Prystaiko's recent BBC Ukrainian service interview gave rise to an avalanche of Russian fakes and manipulations. Russian media claim Ukraine is ready to abandon the Minsk agreements, that Ukraine is ready to accept Russian President Vladimir Putin's alternative proposals, including a peacekeeping mission on the contact line with the self-proclaimed but recognized by nobody People's Republics, and even that Ukraine is willing to give the Kremlin control of the border. Russian reactions to Prystaiko's interview are filled with phrases that are pulled out of context and supplemented with speculation and distortion. In his interview, Prystaiko talked about resolving the conflict in eastern Ukraine. He speculated about what Ukraine could offer to compel the Kremlin to pull its troops out of Ukraine's occupied territories. Now, Prystaiko did talk about the possibility of pulling out of the Minsk agreement in order to find new ways to end the war, and not because Ukraine is unwilling to abide by the terms. Ukraine's foreign minister also talked about the introduction of a Donbas peacekeeping mission. But Vladimir Putin certainly did not come up with this idea. In fact, it was President Petro Poroshenko who first suggested it back in 2015. As for Ukraine's border with Russia, the Kremlin proposes that troops be deployed only on the line of contact, while Ukraine insists that the border control should be returned to Kyiv. Prystaiko said the only concession Kyiv can make is to allow OSCE observers alongside Ukrainian military forces on the border. Prystaiko also pointed out in the BBC interview that Ukraine has fulfilled all requirements for a meeting of the Normandy 4, yet Russia deliberately delays the process. Prystaiko said, quote, "We are counting on a concrete conversation. What do you really want from us? That we cease to exist as an independent state? We can never give you this." And finally, earlier this month, Russia returned 3 Ukrainian naval ships it illegally captured a year ago in the Black and Azov Seas. Russian politicians and political analysts described the return as a gesture of peace from a peace-loving country, and that this move demonstrates Russia's rejection of violence in its relations with Ukraine, and that Moscow will ignore Kyiv provocations and instead will focus on goodwill. Now, in November of 2018, the Russian Navy rammed into Ukrainian ships in the Kerch Strait, opened fire, and hijacked all 3 ships and crew. In September of this year, the captured Ukrainian soldiers returned home as part of an exchange between Kyiv and Moscow, where the Kremlin agreed to free Ukrainian hostages held on the territory of the Russian Federation. Moscow, however, kept the ships and finally returned them on November the 18th, 3 days before the UN International Tribunal was to take up Ukraine's case against Russia for violating the immunity of the Ukrainian ships and crew. The return of captured ships had nothing to do with Russia's goodwill. Kyiv began work on releasing the sailors and ships from the first day Russia captured them, In January of this year, Ukraine submitted its first lawsuit against Russia to the European Court of Human Rights, and in April, appealed to the UN International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. In record short time, the tribunal issued an interim decision ordering Russia to immediately release the 24 captured Ukrainian sailors and return Ukraine's captured ships. Although Russia complied with the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea order and returned the ships, they stripped the ships bare, removing light fixtures, plugs, and even toilets. That's it for this week. You can find much more dissected disinformation on our website, StopFake.org. Be vigilant, look out for fakes, and if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, forward it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.